దూరవిద్యా విధానంలో డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ ఓపెన్ యూనివర్సిటీ దేశంలోనే మొట్టమొదటి సార్వత్రిక విశ్వవిద్యాలయం. దాదాపు 2.5 దశాబ్దాలుగా దూరవిద్యా విధానం ద్వారా కంప్యూటర్ కోర్సును అనుసంధానం చేస్తూ బీఏ, బీకామ్, బీఎస్సీ డిగ్రీ కోర్సులను అందిస్తోంది. పోస్ట్ గ్రాడ్యుయేషన్ స్థాయి, డిగ్రీ, డిప్లొమా స్థాయి కోర్సులను ఔత్సాహికులైన విద్యార్థులకు అందిస్తోంది. డెవలప్మెంట్ స్టడీస్లో సెంటర్ ఫర్ ఎకనామిక్స్ అండ్ సోషల్ స్టడీస్ ద్వారా ఎంఫిల్, పీహెచ్డీతో పాటు విశ్వవిద్యాలయమే స్వయంగా దూర విద్యా విధాన అంశంపైన పీహెచ్డీ వంటి పరిశోధన కోర్సులు ప్రవేశపెట్టింది. సుమారు 4.5 లక్షల మంది విద్యార్థులు ఈ విశ్వవిద్యాలయం నుంచి ఉన్నత విద్యావకాశాలు పొందుతున్నారు. డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ సార్వత్రిక విశ్వవిద్యాలయం స్థానికంగా స్వయం బోధనా పద్ధతిలో ముద్రణ రూపంలో రూపొందించిన కోర్స్ మెటీరియల్ అందిస్తోంది. కోర్స్ మెటీరియల్ అధ్యయనానికి సహకరించే విధంగా రేడియో, టెలివిజన్ పాఠ్యాంశాల ఆధారంగా కార్యక్రమాలు ప్రసారం చేస్తోంది. అధ్యయన కేంద్రాల ద్వారా ఏర్పాటు చేసే సలహా సంసర్గ తరగతులు, సైన్స్ ప్రాక్టికల్ సౌకర్యాలు విద్యార్థులకు స్వయం అధ్యయనానికి ఒక చక్కటి అవకాశం. ఇవి విద్యార్థి సమీపంలో ఉండే అధ్యయన కేంద్రం నుంచే పొందొచ్చు.
Welcome viewers to this teleconference on the topic Essential Elements of a Valid Contract. This lesson pertains to the course Business Law from the BCom second year UG program of the university. The law of contract is that branch of law which deals with the circumstances under which promises or agreements made by the parties are legally binding on them. The essential elements of the contract should be present in any contract for it to be enforceable in a court of law. In order to discuss this from a 360-degree angle, we have got two experts here with us. Professor Lalita, Senior Faculty Member, RG Kedia College of Business Management, and Mr. Srinivas Rao, Director, Ships Academy. During the discussion, should you have any questions or queries, please do call us on the following telephone numbers: 040-2703-1431, 2703-1432, 2703-1433. Professor Lalita, now what according to you should our students expect out of this discussion?
Thank you. The purpose of this presentation is to provide the student with an overview, the essence, the essential elements of a valid contract, the types of contract, and in what circumstances a contract or an agreement will be valid, and also the remedies for breach of contract. In fact, the Indian Contract Act 1872 is divided basically into two sections. The first 6 chapters, they are devoted to the general principles of contract, while the later part, the special contracts, they are for example, the contract of bailments, then contract of agency, and contract of indemnity and guarantee. These will be discussed in detail in the foregoing discussion.
Okay. Mr. Srinivas Rao, is the Indian Contract Act an exhaustive act?
Good evening, viewers. Indian Contract Act is not a exhaustive law. Indian Contract Act deals with only general principles of contract and the special contracts only. Contracts like a partnership, Sale of Goods Act, Negotiable Instruments Act, insurance, etc. are not covered in the Indian Contract Act. There are other specified laws or legislations for this. Indian Contract Act basically deals with only general principles of contract as well as special contracts. It is not a exhaustive law. It covers only part of the contract law.
Okay. So the Indian Contract Act basically is not an exhaustive act, and the Indian Contract Act also is divided into two parts. The first part is the general law of contracts. The special part is the special agreements like indemnity and guarantee, bailment and pledge, and the law of agency. And then we also have the Sale of Goods Act. Professor Lalita, what is the nature of the law of contract?
Unlike other laws, the law of contract does not give us the set of rights and duties of the parties. In fact, it only gives us the limiting principles within which an agreement must be made by the parties. For example, X and Y would like to enter into an agreement. So it is left to them what would be the monetary value, what goods may be sold subject to the limitations provided by the law. For example, it should not contain unlawful object, unlawful consideration. So there are certain limiting principles within which an agreement should be carried out, or it should be enforced in a court of law. Subject to this, law would help the parties in the enforcement of this agreement.
Okay. So, as per Professor Lalita was saying that the Indian Contract Act does not give us the list of contracts which have to be entered into. It just gives us the limiting principles. It just gives us the yardsticks within which we have to make contracts which are beneficial to ourselves. Now, Mr. Srinivas Rao, it is said that the Indian Contract Act is not the whole law of obligations. Now, could you please elucidate on this?
Indian Contract Act is not the whole law of obligation. What is the obligation? Obligation means duty, responsibility to be performed. There is one saying by name, all contracts are agreements, but all agreements are not necessarily contracts. Obligations are classified into two types: social obligation, legal obligation. When parties are intended to create legal obligation, when parties are thought of creating legal obligation, there is a contract. That's why all contracts are agreements. For example, X agrees with Y. Mr. Y, I will sell my business for 1 crore. Y said, I will buy. There is offer from X, acceptance from Y, there is a agreement. What is the purpose of agreement? Sale of business. Sale of business is legal. Here parties are intended to create legal relationship. So, all contracts are agreements. Other one is social obligation. When parties are intended to create, before we enter into contract, there is a offer, acceptance, agreement. The persons made a proposal to another with an intention to create a social obligation. There is an offer, there is an acceptance, there is an agreement, but it is not enforceable. The logic is simple. Contract is nothing but a agreement enforceable before the law. Here agreement is there, but it has no enforceability, because parties are intended to create social obligation. X agrees with Y. Both of us go for picnic. Y said yes. Offer is there, acceptance is there, agreement is there. Later part, if Y fails to come to picnic, X cannot file a case, because parties are not intended to create a legal obligation. Going to picnic is a social obligation. Here I verify carefully. Agreement is there, but it has no enforceability, because parties are not intended to create legal obligation. So the rule is very simple again here. All obligations are nothing but all agreements are not contracts. So derivation is so simple. If the parties are intended to create social, domestic, religious, unlawful, illegal, immoral, or opposed to public policy. If any one of these objectives are there back of that agreement, though agreement is there, it is not enforceable. Hence, Contract Act deals with only legal obligations. It never deals with the social, domestic, other kind of obligations. Hence, we can say Contract Act deals with only legal obligation, but not all legal obligations. Do remember always, if parties are intended to create a legal obligation, then it is a contract. The parties, those who are intended to enter into agreement, creating social, domestic, religious obligations, agreement is there, it has no enforceability, hence it is not a contract. So, we can conclude that all contracts are agreements, but all agreements are not necessarily contracts. Hence, you can conclude that Contract Act deals with only legal obligation, but not a whole law of obligations.
Okay.
Yes.
So that was a very beautiful explanation by Mr. Srinivas Rao, that the Contract Act is not the whole law of obligations. Professor Lalita, could you please tell us what is jus in rem and jus in personam?
Jus in rem is a right available to a party in respect of a thing against the entire world. For example, I have a piece of land, I have every right against every other person in the world, and I have quiet possession and I can enjoy this piece of land. Whereas, when I say just in personam, it is a right available against or in respect of a particular person. For example, I give a loan to you, and it is me who will have a right to recover this loan from you, and you are indebted to me. That is a jus in personam.
So, jus in personam is right against a person, and jus in rem is right against a thing, a peaceful possession of a thing against the whole world. So, that
to
was
supplement to this,
yes, sir.
Indian Contract Act deals with jus in personam, but not jus in rem. That is only concluding.
Okay, okay. Mr. Srinivas Rao, now when you were explaining about the agreement, social agreement and the legal obligations and all, you were all the while talking about contract. Now, can you please tell us the exact definition of a contract?
According to Indian Contract Act, section 2, subsection H, contract is defined as an agreement enforceable by law. Contract is simple definition, agreement enforceable by law. Analyze carefully, there is should be an agreement and enforceability before the law. Then what is agreement? Agreement means every promise or set of the promises forming consideration for each other. This is according to section 2, subsection E. From the definition, what are essentials of the promise? There must be promise, there must be consideration, there are at least two persons. Who are the two persons here? Offerer, offeree, or promiser, promisee. Who is offerer? The person who is making an offer to another. Offeree, the person who is accepting the same. So, there are two distinct persons, namely offerer, offeree. There must be consideration. Consideration means something in return, some benefit, advantage, moving from one person to another person. And there must be promise. If these three elements are satisfied, we can say it is an agreement. Then again, what is promise? According to section 2, subsection B of Indian Contract Act, promise is defined as when a person made a proposal to another, to whom the proposal is given, if the person assented thereto. In simple, we can conclude that contract is nothing but agreement plus enforceability before the law. Agreement is nothing but offer plus acceptance. When that agreement enforceable, it becomes a contract. So, contract means according to section 2 subsection H, an agreement enforceable by law. Then what is agreement? Every promise, set of the promises forming consideration for each other. Then what is promise? When a person made a proposal to another, to whom the proposal is given, if the person assented means accepted. In simple, agreement is nothing but offer plus acceptance.
Very good. So that was the explanation with regard to contract. A contract is an agreement which is enforceable by law. And Professor Lalita, now according to the definition given by Mr. Srinivas Rao, the contract seems to have two essential things. One is an agreement and the enforceability at law. Could you please tell us something?
Yes. Basically, a contract arises out of an agreement. An agreement arises out of an offer and acceptance. Offer and acceptance plus legal obligation plus certain other essentials will give rise to a valid contract. So, it is not just merely a contract that we have to discuss. We would like to know all the essentials of a valid contract. Only then it can be enforced in a court of law. Enforcement is, for example, if A was to sell goods and B was to purchase them. On the due date, if A refuses to sell them, B can approach the court of law and see that either A would sell the goods or get some remedy in a court of law, provided it has all the essentials of a valid contract. So, it must have a legal obligation. It must have all the other essentials. For example, there should be a valid consideration, something in return should be given. Then it should be, the good should be something which is not prohibited by law. So, it should have a lawful object or consideration. The consent should be free, neither A nor B should force each other to enter into a contract, and so on. So, basically a contract arises out of an offer and acceptance. A to make an offer, B to accept it, and B in turn has to make an offer which you call as consideration, and a set of promises which result in an offer and acceptance. So, it must have all the other essential elements to enforce it in a court of law. Otherwise, it will remain in the stage of a void agreement. Sometimes it could be a void agreement, or it may lack some of the essential elements of a valid contract.
Okay. Mr. Srinivas Rao, now you were talking about social obligations and domestic obligations and things like that. Now, at this point of time, there is a famous case here, Balfour versus Balfour. For the benefit of our students, please explain this case.
Yeah. In a contract, always two persons are there, like offer and offer. In case of a suit, there are two persons are the defendant, plaintiff. In case of a Balfour versus Balfour, husband made a promise to his wife, Mr. Balfour, Mrs. Balfour, both are wife and husband. Husband made a promise to his wife, every month I will pay 30 pounds as housing allowances, because he was going to the Ceylon for employment. Her health was not permitting to travel along with her husband. Then he said, you stay back in London, every month I will pay 30 pounds as housing allowances. He paid for some time. Later, both the parties obtained the divorce legally. After separation, he failed to pay this money. She filed a case. Court given the ruling, your agreement is outside the realm of the contract. Means what? When parties are married, when persons got married, legal relationship is created. It is the first and foremost duty of the husband to maintain the family, should provide adequate funds for maintenance of the family. If not, she can borrow some loan. In case, if she unable to pay, husband has to pay. With marriage, legal relations are created. It may be according to Indian Marriages Act, Special Marriages Act, or personal laws. Once the parties got separated, the legal relations between both the parties are come to an end. After separation, there was no intention to create a legal relationship. With marriage, relations are created. With the separation, the relations are come to an end. After separation, parties are not having any intention to have legal relationship. In the year 1919, this case was happened. After separation, there was no relationship between the wife and husband, hence he need not to pay the any housing allowances. So there was no intention to create a legal relationship after the separation. We can conclude like that.
So before the separation, when the contract was entered into, there was every possibility of it being called a contract.
Yes.
But because of the separation, the intention was absent. Because the intention was absent, the court of law held that this is not a does not come under the realm of contracts. Okay, Mr. Srinivas Rao. Now suppose X and Y are there. There are two parties. Now X invites Y to dinner. Y doesn't turn up. Do you think X will have any remedy?
Mr. Rabindranath Garu, no sir. Why? Because simple logic. X invites Y for dinner. Y invited the Y accepted the invitation. Offer is there, acceptance is there, agreement is there. What is the purpose of agreement? Providing the dinner. Dinner is a social obligation. Whether to provide the dinner or not, left to X discretion. By providing dinner to Y, what benefit X is going to secure? There is no consideration. Man is a social animal, want to live together. Offering a dinner, lunch, tea, coffee, snack to a party is a courtesy. By offering that one, there was no intention to create a legal relationship. Here, Y will not succeed against A any kind of remedy. Even he can't claim the reimbursement of travelling expenses. It's a purely social obligation.
So here in this point, because it is a social obligation, it cannot be enforced in a court of law. And another thing, there is no consideration also. Consideration is something in written,
Yes.
in the sense of quid pro quo, something in
Quid
written.
pro quo.
So because there the party who is getting the dinner is not giving something in return to the person giving the dinner, so this also cannot be called as a contract. Now Professor Lalita,
Yes.
now what does section 10 say about as regards agreements?
Section 10 in fact deals with all the essential elements of a valid contract, stating that all agreements are contracts if they are formed by competent parties with a lawful object, and it also states that there are certain agreements which are declared as void by the court. So in fact it covers all the essential elements of a valid contract, starting from offer and acceptance. Then it also states about the consensus ad idem, that is meeting of the minds of the parties on the same thing at the same time.
Okay.
So it covers basically, if we know about section 10, we know all the essential elements of a valid contract.
To
So
supplement to Madam, I will add some points.
Yes, sir, please.
According to section 10 of the Indian Contract Act, what are the essential elements? Offer and acceptance, intention to create a legal relationship, capacity to contract, consideration, lawful objective, free consent, certainty and possibility of performance, writing and registration, agreements not declared as void. These are all, according to section 10, essential elements of the valid contract. It almost covers, except breach and remedies for breach of contract, all essential elements of the valid contract. Section 10, to supplement to Madam.
Yeah.
Yes.
So dear students, section 10 is the basis of the essential elements of a valid contract, and section 10 says all agreements are contracts if they are entered into by the free will of the parties competent to contract with a lawful object, with a lawful consideration, and are not expressly declared to be void. So out of this section 10 flows all the essential elements of a valid contract. Now Professor Lalita, the essential elements say that the person should be competent to contract. So are there people who are not competent to enter into contracts?
We have section 10 of the Indian Contract Act, which states that there are three categories of people with whom we should not enter into contracts. They are, first category, persons of unsound mind with whom we should not enter into contracts. Then we have say people who have not attained the age of majority. In other words, we should not enter into contracts with minors. Then the third category is other persons who are disqualified by law. So people with persons of unsound mind cannot say estimate the they'll not be able to rationalize the judgment, and therefore we should not enter into contracts with them. They do not understand the consequences of entering into a contract. So we'll be at risk if we enter into contract with such people. Similarly, we have the Indian Majority Act, which says that we should not enter into contracts with minors. That is, a minor is a person who has not attained the age of, who has not completed the age of 18. So any agreement with a minor is void. In fact, it is void ab initio. From the very beginning, it is void. So even if you have entered into a contract, say X promises to hand over some goods to Y, who is a minor, and Y is to pay some 10,000. Now, if X refuses to pay, or such an agreement is void. But if Y insists, Y the minor insists that he needs these goods for as a necessary item, X has to hand over these goods under exceptions. So in general, an agreement with the minor is void. Similarly, agreements with persons of unsound mind, they are also void. And similarly, we should not enter into contracts with persons who are disqualified by law. For example, they could be convicts. While they are undergoing imprisonment, an agreement with them will be void unless they take special permission known as the ticket of leave.
Ticket of leave.
Yeah. So these are three categories.
To supplement to Madam, who is a competent to contract? According to section 10, he must be major, he must be sound mind, and he must not be disqualified by any other law. According to section 11, who is incompetent to contract? Means who cannot enter into contract. As Madam rightly mentioned, minor, unsound person, alien enemy, insolvent, convicted. Who is convicted? Undergoing imprisoned person, not accused, undergoing imprisoned person, convicted. And in case of a company, if the board of directors are acting against memorandum and articles of association, as we know it is called ultra vires acts, these are all disqualified. So do remember, friends, he must not be a minor, he must be a sound mind, and he must not be disqualified by any other law. 10 deals with the competency, 11 deals with the incompetency to the contract.
Okay. So, as the experts were pointing out, that persons with whom you are entering into a contract should be competent to enter into a contract, and there are three broad parties who are expressly not competent to enter into contract, that is persons of unsound mind. The rationale behind a person of unsound mind not being competent to enter into a contract is because a person of unsound mind will not be able to judge the effect of the agreement that he is entering into, whether it is for his benefit or not. Now, this person of unsound mind can either be a lunatic or he may be an idiot. A lunatic is a person who suffers from incompetency or who suffers from unsound mind during certain periods. So, when a contract is entered into with a person who is a lunatic during the periods of his lunacy, then those contracts become void. But when a person is of sound mind, the contracts entered into by him become perfectly valid. While an idiot is a person who is permanently of unsound mind. So, all contracts with idiots are completely void. And persons who are minors, minors are people who have not attained the age of 18 years. Contracts with minors are void. Now, here the law gives special protection to minors. Now, it says that when a minor enters into a contract, it is void ab initio, that is void from the beginning. From the beginning, the contract is a void contract, it cannot be enforced in a court of law. But however, when the contract is for the necessities of the minor, it becomes a valid contract. Now, Mr. Srinivas Rao, at this point, I am just skeptical. There is a famous case here, Mohri Bibi versus Dharmadas Ghosh. Can you please explain that case?
Yeah, in case of a Mohri Bibi versus Dharmadas Ghosh, I simply summarize the case. Minor approached the money lender, mortgage my property worth of 20,000, give me some loan. Money lender, knowing well, minor was he was a minor, mortgaged the property, sanctioned a loan of the 8,000. Subsequently, minor filed a case in the court, praying the court that he was a minor, agreement with minor is void. Hence, release my property from the mortgage and relieve me from liability. Court held you take back your property from the mortgage and you need not repay that 8,000. A clear rule was established first time. Agreement with the minor is void. Mohri BB versus Dharmadas Ghosh, void ab initio, which means is void. An agreement which is not enforceable from the beginning is called void ab initio. This was case almost more than a century ago. Today also same rule, agreement with the minor is void ab initio.
Right, ab initio. So, pointing out to section 10, all agreements or contracts if they are entered into by the free will of the parties competent to contract. Here we have discussed at length what is the meaning of competency, and we said that persons of unsound mind, minors and persons disqualified by law are incompetent. So, agreements with people other than these can be valid agreements. Further, Mr. Srinivas Rao, we were also saying for a lawful consideration. Now, please explain to me what is the meaning of lawful consideration.
Yeah. Consideration is one of the essential elements of the valid contract. What is consideration? In simple words, something in return. Assume I have purchased a mobile. What is my consideration? Mobile. Seller consideration is cash. In return of the mobile, I am giving the cash, and vice versa. In return of the cash, he is giving the mobile. My consideration is the mobile, his consideration is the cash, something in return. According to section 2 subsection D of Indian Contract Act, what is consideration? When at the desire of the promisor, promisee or any other person has done or abstained from doing or does, abstains from doing or promises to do or abstains from doing such act or abstinence is called consideration. From the definition, if you observe carefully, abstained, abstains, abstain, which means consideration may be past, present, future. And the consideration may be positive consideration, it may be negative consideration. Will you buy my car? Positive consideration. Will you work for my company? Positive consideration. I am borrowing some loan. I asked Mr. Rabindranath, give me some guarantee. He said yes, contract of guarantee under section 126. By giving the guarantee, he is not getting any benefit, but agreement is enforceable, positive by nature. Other one is abstain. Abstain means negative. X is responsible for one minor incident of accident, very, very minor accident, minute. Opposite person said, I will go to police station. He said, please don't go to police station, I will pay compensation. He said yes. For every case, it is not to go to the directly police station. Certain cases are there. Of course, if you want to settle the case, methods are there. Litigation, mediation, arbitration. You can sort out issues. Here you want to settle the case amicably, that too not a crime involved. Hence, compromise. If you don't go to police station, I will pay compensation. Negative consideration. It is valid outside the court. If I say withdraw the case, I will pay compensation. Negative consideration. The consideration may be past, present, future. So, according to section 2 subsection D, there should be consideration. Your consideration need not be adequate. Adequacy means sufficiency. You are owner of this building, market value 10 crores. Parties are ready to pay, table cash. But you say to your friend, will you buy my house for rupees 1 rupee? You can sell. 10 crores of property, if you are willing to sell, even you can sell for 1 rupee. Consideration need not be adequate. For example, X sold his car, cost 1 lakh for 70,000. Later, can X file a case on account of inadequacy? I want to cancel the contract? No. Consideration need not be adequate, need not be sufficient, but it must be real, means it must not be vague. X says to Y, do this work, I will pay certain amount. How much? As a worker, he is expecting 1000. As a boss, I thought of paying rupees 100. Amount is not certain. I have to pay 1 lakh. If I say I will pay 1 lakh when I am able to pay, there is no clarity here. Thereby, friends, remember, amount should be adequacy not necessary, but it must be real and it must not be vague. It should not be a vague one. And at the same time, consideration should be lawful, which means what? It must not be unlawful, illegal, immoral or impossible. What is unlawful? Give me 1 lakh, I see to that you will secure the rank in so and so examination. Unlawful objective, unlawful consideration. X says to Y, give me 10 lakhs, I see to that you will become public servant. If you want to become public servant, there is a government policy. If this fellow say, give money, I see to that you will become public servant, which means object is unlawful, consideration also unlawful. Other one, impossible, bring the moon onto the earth, I will give 1 crore. Object is impossible, consideration also impossible. So, in simple terms, remember, consideration need not be adequate, but it must be real and it must be lawful. No consideration, no contract, according to Abdul Aziz versus Muazzam Ali. In this case, one person promised to secretary of the masjid, I will pay certain amount for the rebuilding of the masjid. Later, not paid. Can secretary file a case? No. Even if he file a case, he will not succeed. By paying something to the temple, church or a masjid for the repair, rebuilding or a renovation, in turn, what he is going to get? No consideration, no contract. Abdul Aziz versus Muazzam Ali. However, under section 25, there are certain exceptions. Even without consideration, agreements are enforceable. What are those? When agreements are made out of natural love and affection. Father says to his children, I will transfer my entire property on your name. Transferred. By transferring the property, in turn, what dad is going to get? Nothing. The rule of no consideration, no contract is not applicable. Here it is taking place out of natural love and affection. For creation of agency under section 185. For completed gift, by giving the gift, what benefit you are securing? In a gift, there are 2 persons are there. What is gift? Voluntary transfer of either movable or immovable property from one person to another person. There are 2 persons, namely donor and donee. Donor is one who is offering the gift. Donee is one who is accepting the gift. By giving the gift, what benefit donor is securing? Nothing. The rule of no consideration, no contract is not applicable here. And promise to pay time barred debt and voluntary services, contract of bailment, charity. In all the cases, the rule of no consideration, no contract is not applicable. Do remember, according to section 10, consideration is one of the essential element. Consideration means something in return. Then according to Justice Patterson, consideration means something which has some value in the eyes of the law. Then what is consideration according to section 2D? Then consideration need not be adequate, but it must be real. No consideration, no contract. However, there are certain exceptions under section 25 of the contract law. This way you can say one of the essential elements of the valid contract is lawful consideration.
So, one point I would like to supplement.
Yes, ma'am.
Inadequacy of consideration, although the court does not consider, yet it will take into account whether there was free consent or not. For example, there is inadequacy of consideration and it was not out of free consent. Then both the points will be looked into by the court, whether there was free consent and whether consideration was adequate or not. For example, you may force your friend to sell his car for 1 rupee. Now, if the parties, now here there is coercion, where there is force, we call this factor as coercion. There the court will also look into the adequacy of consideration, stating that it's only 1 rupee and not the actual real worth of the car.
Okay.
That's the thing. So, adequacy of consideration is not a point at all, so long as there is free consent.
That's free consent.
So, dear students, section 2D defines consideration as when at the desire of the promisor, the promisee or any other person does something or abstains from doing something, that act or abstinence is said to be consideration for the contract. Now, one essential thing is when at the desire of the promisor. The consideration should come at the desire of the promisor, and it may be the promisee or any other person. So, it's not necessary that the promisee himself has to do the act or abstain from doing it, it may be somebody else also. So, that was section 2D, the defining consideration. Now, Professor Lalita, section 10 says when all agreements or contracts, if they are entered into by the free will of the parties. Now, what is the meaning of free will? What is free consent?
Yes. Now, free consent, every agreement to be valid, one of the important elements is that there should be free consent. Now, we would say that there are 5 important factors which come in the way of free consent. Even if one of the factors is there, we say that there is absence of free consent. The willingness is not out of free will. You are entering into an agreement, for example, A agrees to say purchase some goods from B out of free will. So, also B agrees to pay for it out of free will. If A says, or if one party compels the other to sell the goods or out of compulsion, we say that there is absence of free will. You are threatened, you are forced to enter into such an agreement. So, there are 5 factors, the first one being coercion. Coercion is threatening the other party to enter into an agreement or doing some act which is prohibited by the Indian Penal Code and so on. So, also you have the other factors, say the undue influence, then you have fraud, you have misrepresentation, you have mistake and so on. Any one of these factors, if they enter into the agreement, we say there is absence of free consent, and such an agreement could be void, voidable, depending on what type of factor has crept into that particular agreement. For example, A threatens to kill B if B doesn't sell his car for 1 rupee, something like that. Now, A enters into this agreement, we call here, it is not of free will that A has entered into the agreement, and we say it is a case of coercion. And the consequence of this is, A can still go to a court of law. The consequence is the agreement is voidable. Voidable means at the option of the aggrieved party, Mr. A, either you can just get rid of it or and complete the contract, or he could declare it as void by approaching the court of law.
Yeah.
So, we have these different factors which come in the way of free consent. So, out of when you enter into, when somebody makes an offer, it is out of free will that you have to give your consent. It is not out of some force or some say undue influence, or because he is in dominant position you are trying to enter into an agreement which you call a case of undue influence and so on. Or a wrong statement of facts are made to you stating that the quality is very good and so on. It is a case of fraud. The party would just get rid of the goods giving some wrong statements. Or the party making the statement does not know he is making a wrong statement, which is a case of misrepresentation. The major difference between misrepresentation and fraud is that the intention of the parties. Say in case of misrepresentation, the party making the wrong statement about the subject matter himself does not know that it is a false statement. Whereas in case of fraud, he knows very well that he is making a wrong statement, but he would like to deceive and make a profit out of this situation.
Then what is mistake, ma'am?
Mistake is again it's a wrong belief about the subject matter of contract. It could be about the quality, the quantity or the title of the subject matter and so on. For example, X and Y enter into an agreement to purchase a certain item, assuming that it belongs to a certain period of time, but later on they discover that it belongs to the latest period. So, here it is a mistaken belief regarding the identity of the subject matter. So, it is a bilateral mistake. Or if I go to a shop and I assume that the quality is very good without questioning the shopkeeper, then it is a unilateral mistake regarding the quality of the subject matter. I cannot blame the seller for taking this decision, and I cannot avoid the contract also, because it is on my own I have thought that the quality is very good. if the seller say induces me to buy it stating that it's very good quality and later on it turns out to be a cheaper one, then we call it a case of fraud.
Fraud.
It's not a mistake, there it's a
Yeah.
case of fraud.
Okay.
So it's
To supplement like this, you can add, sir.
Yes.
What is a free consent? What is a consent? Consent is according to section 13. Nothing but a consensus ad idem. What is consensus? Receiving the same thing in the same sense. Free consent means the party to agreement should give acceptance voluntarily, willfully, deliberately, intentionally. You are not forced or pressurized to enter into contract. That consent is called free consent. That's why they say, if the consent of the party is not obtained by using coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation, mistake, this is called as free consent. What is coercion? Threatening, physical force, compulsion. According to section 15, what is coercion? Committing or threatening to commit any act forbidden by IPC 1860, or unlawful detaining, threatening to detaining any other person's property with a view to enter into agreement. One familiar case always we refer here, Chikkim Amiraju versus Seshamma. Whenever we refer the coercion section 15, this was the eminent case. To understand here, our point is coercion according to Constitution of India, Article 21, right to live. If any person say I will die, threatening to commit a suicide, attempted suicide is coercion. Husband says to his wife, transfer our property on my name, otherwise I will commit a suicide. She said, yes, I will transfer the property. Her consent was not free. She was forced to enter into contract. This is threatening to commit a suicide. Other one, attempted but not successful. Ordinarily in the movies we will see, one fellow jump into water to die. Hero, heroine also will jump and save the person. Attempted but not successful. We have right to live, we have no right to die. Other one, if I hold the Rabindranath sir's mobile and said, give me 1 lakh, otherwise I won't give this. It is a diamond based mobile. Unlawful detaining, threatening to detaining other person's property with a view to enter into agreement. This is coercion side. In English law, coercion is called duress. On the other hand, section 16, remember section 15 coercion, 16 undue influence, fraud 17, misrepresentation 18. These 4 are called voidable. What is voidable? As the rightly mentioned, voidable contract is one which is valid at the option of either of the party but not at the option of other or others. Party who is aggrieved party should go to court. Another one, undue influence. When the relations are satisfying between the persons, one person is in a position to dominate the will of other person, to get some advantage. Here there is no physical pressure. This is purely moral pressure, mental pressure. Fraud is intentional. That is an active concealment of the fact. A promise made without intention to perform. There is active concealment of the fact. We can call it as a fraud. There must be an intention to deceive. Do you remember? An attempt to deceive is not a fraud. An attempt to deceive is not a fraud. Successfully deceived, then only fraud. And mere silence is the known fact is not a fraud. Mere silence as to known fact is not a fraud. However, there are certain exceptions. Silence is equivalent to fraud. Then, Madam rightly mentioned one word. Intentional representation is a fraud. Innocent representation is a misrepresentation. Mistake, simple word, remember, erroneous belief about something. An erroneous belief about something. I felt. There are 2 types of mistakes, unilateral mistake and bilateral mistake. One party is under the mistake, unilateral. Bi means 2. Both are under the mistake, bilateral. Mistake is always void in a broader sense, but unilateral mistake is valid because one is under the mistake, but other one can correct, there can be a contract. So, coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation is voidable, mistake is void. That we can interpret. Sir.
So, as per the discussions, we have seen that a consent is said to be free when it is not induced by coercion, undue influence, misrepresentation, fraud or mistake. Now, Mr. Srinivas Rao, in the same vein, can you please tell us what is a lawful object?
According to section 10 of the Indian Contract Act, one of the essential element is lawful objective. Object means purpose. For what purpose parties are entered into contract, it must be lawful. It must not be unlawful, illegal, immoral. What is illegal? X and Y come together, we do smuggling, illegal, forbidden by law, against the law. X and Y come together, we kidnap the judge, illegal. Other one, X and Y come to an agreement to do illicit liquor business, illegal. X knows Y is a prostitute, knowingly given the house for the rental purpose. This is immoral, against moral values of the society. And other one is agreement opposed to public policy. Give me 10 lakhs, I see to that will become public servant. Agreement which interfere with administration of government. So, object means purpose. The parties intended to enter into contract, they should have intention to enter into contract only for lawful purpose, but not for illegal, immoral or agreement opposed to public policy. That way you can say these words.
Yeah. Professor Lalita, what are agreements expressly declared to be void?
Yes. Agreements, where there is absence of consideration, it's void. Agreements with minor, they are void ab initio. Then we have especially the agreements where the object is unlawful, illegal, all these are also void agreements. And we also have a set of agreements known as wagering agreements or wagers.
Okay.
So, a wagering agreement or a wager is one where one party promises to pay money or money's worth on the happening of a particular event, and in turn the other party to pay money or money's worth on the non-happening of that particular event. For example, X might say, if it rains fish today as given by a media, yes, I will pay you 1 lakh. And Y would say, if it rains diamonds, I will pay you 2 lakhs.
Yeah.
Now, here it is a case of wager, and the essentials of a wagering agreement or wager, they are like this. There are two parties to the agreement. The parties, and it's based on an uncertain event. The event could be a past event about which we don't have knowledge, or it could be a future event which is to take place. But the parties here are not interested in the happening of the event. In fact, they are interested only in the monetary value. It's something like a betting. So, wagers are not valid in the eyes of law.
Yeah.
In the states of Maharashtra and Gujarat, not only they are void, they are also considered as illegal.
Okay.
So, this is the gist of a wagering agreement.
Right.
Now, the question could be, what is the difference? Even insurance companies, there is a contract to pay money on the happening of an event. For example, if you insure some goods or the life of a particular person, on the happening of a particular event, untoward event, the company is going to pay us some lump sum. But here the difference is, in case of insurance contracts, both the parties are interested in the preservation or continuation of the life or the thing.
Yeah.
They are interested in the subject matter. So, if I insure my life, I am in fact interested in the continuation of the life and not in the money aspect.
Yeah.
Whereas, when I enter into a wagering agreement, whether it's going to rain fish or diamonds today, I am interested only in what I am going to get from you, 1 lakh or 2 lakhs after it rains, let us see.
Yeah.
So, that's the difference between insurance contracts and wagering agreements.
Very good, very good. Now, Mr. Srinivas Rao, now the terms of the agreement should not be vague. They should be absolute, they should be certain. Can you tell us something on this?
Yeah, one of the essential void agreements list is there, and as Madam rightly mentioned. Indian Contract Act deliberately declared certain agreements as void. Section 20 Section 11, Section 20, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 36, 56. These are all list of void agreements. In this number, if you notice 29 is there. The 29 is nothing but agreements which are uncertain. Uncertain agreements. What are uncertain agreements? Which is not being capable of expressing in definite terms. If I say, will you buy my car? I have 2 cars. Which car? Will you sell your horse? You have horse forum. 20 horses are there. Which horse? Will you buy my business for 1 crore or 2 crores? Uncertain. There is no certainty.
Yeah.
On the other hand, section 56, that is impossible. Certain and possibility of the performance. It should be possible to perform. Means it must not be impossible. What is impossible? Bring the moon onto the earth. Impossible. Give a life to dead body. Impossible. Enclose the 2 parallel lines in the space. If you walk 400 kilometers per hour, will anybody walk on this world 400 kilometers per hour? These are all section
Can't
56,
even run.
which are impossible.
Yeah.
That's why find the treasure with magic.
Yeah. So all these are
These are
called as humanly not possible agreements.
Yes.
In order to sum up the discussion, for the benefit of the students, I would request Mr. Srinivas Rao just in a nutshell to sum up the entire topic for today.
Yeah. Today, friends, we discussed about section 10, essential elements of the valid contract. Then,
Yeah.
this is nothing but a offer and acceptance, intention to create a legal relationship, lawful objective, lawful consideration, capacity to contract, free consent, and we can have the certainty possibility, agreements not declared as void, writing registration.
Yeah.
Do remember, contracts need not be in writing, it may be oral.
Oh, okay. So that was the discussion. I thank the experts for coming here and spending their valuable time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.